and it did pull back. I never got down to the level that I was expecting in terms of the charts. So my buy level, I think, and I even think I talked about this on your show last time, was right here. It's a gap fill. It's a former pivot high. And what we saw was it came down and then it retested and now it's coming back down. And you're basically creating a double top here. So as a trader, I look at this and I say, okay, this is resistance up here, and down here would be your support level. So it's coming into resistance. Now, what you'll be watching for here is, can it break above? And if it breaks above, then it could have another leg up. I generally don't like paying up so much on things that have had such big rallies. But in terms of technicals, that's the level right now on the URNM. You want to see if it can basically get above the 99 level or so on the chart. And if it does, then honestly, it could make another significant move higher. For me as a technical trader, I'm very conservative on where I buy. For me, I would still need to see a flush probably down to this 72 area for me to buy into it.
Right. And one thing that we're starting to hear there is, you have to be careful of the volatility in uranium. Do you have any general words of advice for operating in volatile markets for investors?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've traded for now 20 plus years, and I've seen these big moves in stocks and then these big corrections. I still remember vividly First Solar, the solar stocks, this was years ago when they were first the new thing. First Solar ran to $300 a share on a straight line, and then it corrected all the way down maybe to like $20 or $10. And then you look at other scenarios where different sectors have had these big moves and then have corrected. So I'm always careful seeing that past history of what's happened. And I always would rather err on the side of caution. I'm always in kind of that preservation of capital mode where I'd much rather miss a trade than get in at the wrong time and have to sit in it for 5 years just to break even. So for me, I want to see pullbacks to key technical support levels. If it wants to go higher without me, the beauty of it is there's always another trade out there, folks. I've never been in a situation where I was like, oh, that was the last trade there ever was in the world, and I didn't get it. There's always another one tomorrow or the next day. So you always can wait and be patient.
For sure. I think that's great advice. Now, uranium is getting attention partially because of this clean energy trend that we're seeing. And I wanted to ask you, if you look at that sector at all, this clean energy area, is that something that's of interest to you? And what would you be looking at there if so?
Yeah, so I do pay attention to the clean energy, and I think you have to now that the Democrats are looking to push a lot of these bills through for the climate change type stuff and pushing through. My fear about it is that as soon as you start to see that talk and you look at the charts, if they're already extended and they've already rallied on anticipation, then you don't necessarily have a good opportunity to get in at a good price. For me, it's more about looking at the future when no one's talking about it. So one of the things like I've been very interested in recently is the marijuana stocks, right? So, we haven't heard much on marijuana legalization in months, if not even a year or so. And then I look at the chart, right? And I still remember here's CGC, which is Canopy Growth. And it had this massive move up as the Democrats won the White House on all this anticipation, right? And then since then, it's gone quiet because Biden hasn't been a big fan of legalization at the federal level. That's what I love to see, because I see it's so discounted now that there's not a lot of risk for me getting in down here, and there's a lot of upside reward. So all it would take would be, the Democrats or the politicians to say, hey, we need to raise revenue. So you know what? One way to do that is to legalize on the federal basis marijuana. And then you could literally see this go back to $25 or $30, making a double or triple on your money versus what's the downside? I mean, it's basically pricing in no success on legalization. So I like those type of plays more than anything, where you start to look into the future. Same thing with Tilray, ACB, Aurora Cannabis. Those would definitely be the ones I would go for. And just going back to your clean energy comment, you definitely want to be aware of it. But again, for me, it's about buying the lows versus chasing the highs.
Right. Yeah. And on the cannabis side, so would you say it's important to be involved in companies that do have that US exposure, because that's where we're waiting for the legalization?
Yeah, I think the U.S. exposure is key. I mean, some of the ones I brought up are Canadian ones. The beauty of those are that those will move on any sort of legalization here. We've even seen CGC buying out some American companies to get more American exposure on their balance sheet or in their company. So I think that's a good thing. One of the things I like about CGC as well is that Constellation Brands owns, I think, 40% of them at a much higher price, like a $6 billion. They put $6 billion in when this company was much higher. they could swoop in for 3 or 4 billion now and buy the rest of the company really at a very nice discount if they truly see that legalization is coming. So I like companies that you have that chance of a buyout too, because it's one of those scenarios where, it may not happen, but if you wake up in the morning to a double in the stock price because it was bought out, that's always an extra bonus.
Right. And kind of one of the last things on my list to ask you about were oil and gas, what's going on there, just because of that's also in focus as we have the energy crisis over in Europe. Perhaps that is another area that's, too much interest at this point for you.
Yeah, so we actually have a confirmed top on oil, and I want to show this to you guys, and I'll explain what I consider to be a confirmed top for educational purposes. So I was watching oil going up and up and up and up, and it kept on just kind of grinding higher. And what I look for is a reversal day where before the high of the reversal day, and right here was the reversal day. So it was the highest point and you closed at the lows, a pretty nice reversal. And what I look for is a confirming down day of significance prior to the high being taken out. So you can see here the next day you went up, but you never took out that tail high. And then the following day you had a big down move. To me, that confirms a short-term top. You then went sideways to up, and now you're seeing a big sell-off in oil today. So those are the types of signals I look for. We hadn't gotten that signal all the way on the move up. This was the first time it occurred. So that really raises alarm bells for me, and it gets me on the side of saying, okay, oil should go down. Natural gas, we can take a look at the UNG real quick. I've been shorting the nat gas chart quite a bit recently via KOLD, making quite a bit of money. And this actually is very interesting to me because you have a trend line here that hasn't broken yet, but you could arguably say it's a head and shoulders pattern. So I would likely be looking to short natural gas again and look for a break of this trend line probably in the next week or two for another wave down in natural gas prices. And always remember, and this was one of my keys to shorting natural gas, was that as soon as I turned on CNBC one morning a couple of weeks ago, and all they were talking about was the energy crisis in Europe and sky high natural gas prices, that always tells you it's usually near a top when you start to hear that in the media, because what's happening is the media is pushing it out to the masses, and then you're all getting out and kind of getting to that point of max bullishness, and max bullishness means there's no one else to go long. Once everyone's gone long, who else is going to buy? And so the ultimate path is to the downside.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting when we talk about these kind of unloved industries that you're going into, like cannabis has been pretty dead so far this year. Maybe you can give investors some advice about how to be a little bit more agnostic to industry, because I know we have an audience who's so focused on mining, it might be a little bit hard to get out of that box sometimes.
Yeah, the one thing I always say to people, and some people fall in love with stocks, there's so many people in love with crypto right now and Tesla and stuff like that. And really, to be honest, gold and silver are almost unloved in comparison.